All stand, please. All persons having anything to do with this sitting of the Supreme Court of Tasmania draw nigh and give your attendance. Please be seated.
The matter is proceeding, Your Honour. Could Mr Walkley be recalled to the box?
Yes, thank you.
You remain on oath as previously sworn. Do you understand?
I do.
Thanks, Mr Walkley. You shut the back door, please. The door. Oh, thank you. Mr Reid.
Thank you. Mr Walkley brought another piece of paper into court with you today.
That's the piece of paper you gave me yesterday. Memorandum of understanding.
Yes, thank you. Oh, we could take that back then. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Now, Mr Walkley, the document you read from when giving evidence in response to Mr Thomas and Mr Gilmore, that document's sitting on top of the folder, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yes. Now, that document was prepared by solicitors Hall and Wilcox, wasn't it?
It was prepared by them, spoken by me.
Right. And the front page makes it clear that it was prepared by them.
That's correct.
Yes. So when you said to His Honour yesterday that you were asked, can you confirm for His Honour whose notes are they and why they were prepared? You said they were my notes. I took home or had sent to me the reports prepared by Mr Thomas and Mr Gilmore. I sat at home and read them, and I made notes and typed those notes into a document, which I have in front of me now. That was a mistake, was it?
No, I did type them up and then I sent them on.
But the notes that you typed up you didn't have in front of you, did you?
I don't understand what you're saying.
What you had in front of you was your proof of evidence, and you were reading from that, weren't you?
Yes, and they are from the notes I took at home and typed up on my computer at home.
Right. Well, can you open up your folder and find those notes, please?
These are the notes.
No, those are notes you've accepted prepared by Hall and Wilcox. Where are the ones typed by you, Mr Walker?
No, but the heading page was prepared and sent by the solicitors. The other pages I typed up at home. That is these pages from 2 onwards. I typed at home and sent them through via email.
Okay, thank you, Mr Walkley. Now, Mr Walkley, it's correct, isn't it, that you're not able to point to any fire language in your area of origin that is consistent with fire starting in the vicinity of the stump and moving east from the vicinity of the stump?
Yes, I explained yesterday that there is much fire language in the area I walked around, indicating that the fire originated and spread from the area of the stump.
Mr Walkley, would you please address the question that I'm asking you? You are not able, are you, to point to any fire language in your area of origin which is consistent with the fire starting in the vicinity of the stump and moving east from the vicinity of the stump?
That's correct.
Thank you. Now, the fire language that was available in your area of origin suggests that the fire was moving from the south, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. Within the fire area of origin, the fire was moving in various directions, as you would expect in an area of confusion.
Mr Walkley, I'm asking you about the fire language that you observed. The only fire language that we've had evidence of within your area of origin, which gives an indication of direction, is that contained in photographs 6 and 10 in document 101, the 2 tussocks. That's correct, isn't it?
No, that's not correct. I haven't been asked to elaborate on fire language within the fire area of origin.
Mr Walkley, you were asked that and you said it was an area of confusion.
And the area of confusion is very much similar to the area of origin. I thought I'd made that fairly clear yesterday.
Well, Mr. Walkley, to support your theory as to the cause of this fire, you have nothing more than three things. One, the fact of the campfire. Two, a root that had burned. And three, the absence of any other cause you could find within your area of origin. That is a correct statement, is it not?
No, it's not.
What else do you have?
We have the evidence of the information that the lady who lived at the house offered me and gave me in relation to what she saw and observed at the time of the fire.
That she saw a line of fire outside your area of origin.
No, that's not correct. She saw the line of fire within the area of origin.
That was her first statement. She then reconsidered it, didn't she? And she put it outside the area of origin.
Well, there's a problem with nomenclature here, Mr. Reid. What are you referring to as the area of origin if you're not referring to the two lines that Ms. Barrett drew and which were subsequently surrounded by pink tape by police?
Yes. The pink tape, Mr. Walkley, is what I'm referring to as the area of origin. That was put up by you to signify your area of origin, wasn't it?
No, it was put up. I was asked yesterday who put it up, and I couldn't recall who put the tape up. The second line that the owner of the property drew on the ground, as I said yesterday, is pretty much along the same line as that tape that was as the pink line on the ground.
The pink tape signifies your area of origin, doesn't it, Mr. Walkley?
It does.
Thank you. And the pink tape was put in place before the pink lines were drawn. That's so, isn't it?
I don't remember which was done first.
Thank you. So when I'm speaking of the area of origin, I'm speaking of the area within the pink tape. Do you understand that?
I understand that.
Yeah, and you agree with it?
I agree with that.
Yes, thank you. Now, the lady told you that she saw a line of fire that was at least at the eastern end of your area of origin, didn't she?
Objection.
Yes, Mr. Armstrong.
Sorry, Your Honour, that's... my friend has already acknowledged that there were two separate statements from Ms. Barrett, and the proposition that he just put was not a complete account of the evidence. I don't want to elaborate in front of the witness.
Mr. Reid?
Ms. Barrett told you, amongst other things, Ms. Barrett first drew a line closer to the house than your easternmost area of origin. That's correct, isn't it?
That's correct.
She then drew a line that was just on or to the east of your area of origin. That's correct.
It was just on that line, as I explained yesterday.
And it was there that she said, when she drew that line, that she first saw the line of fire.
That was her observations at the time, yes, from my memory.
Now, as to the root that had burned, you have no means of knowing when it was burnt, when it burned.
No, I don't. It was just a burnt root under the ground.
And you don't know if it was connected with the stump in which the campfire was lit, did you? Do you?
No, I believe it was, as I said yesterday.
You don't know that it was, though, do you?
I don't know 100% for sure, but I believe it was.
Now, to do your excavation, before you commenced your excavation or during it, you borrowed a mattock from Ms. Barrett?
No, I did not borrow a mattock, and I don't recall anyone else borrowing a mattock.
Right. You don't recall that a mattock was used and the handle broke?
No, I do not.
If it please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Reid. Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Honour. Mr. Walkley, you were just asked some questions about the fire language within the area of origin, and you said that you'd not been asked to elaborate on anything other than the south to north direction of fire travel that my learned friend just asked you about. So could you please explain to His Honour what other physical indicators you observed within the area of confusion that gave you information about the direction or directions in which fire was travelling?
But once we started looking into the area of origin closer, the macro indicators, the bigger ones I spoke of yesterday, which was the leaf freeze and the staining on the bigger trees, that was no longer present because there was no big trees there and there was no smaller things like bracken fern there to look at. So what we started looking at then were things like the cupping on the leaves, on leaf cupping, as I described yesterday, and the burning on the rocks, or the areas on rocks where things were not burnt on one side but on the other side they were burnt. And that, it was, as I said, was in the area of confusion and indicating that the fire was travelling in several different directions from that area.
Now, Mr. Walkley, if I could ask you to picture in your mind the area of confusion as you believe it to have been immediately prior to the fire, and then also add to that mental image a wind blowing from the west towards the east, gusting at a velocity of something like 40 to 50 kilometres an hour. And then using the language of running fire, backing fire and flanking fire, can you explain to His Honour how you would expect a small fire that was started in that area of confusion might then burn in any given direction?
I object, Your Honour.
Yes, Mr. Reid.
Sorry. That doesn't arise in my submission. What does arise are indicators, not an expectation as to how a fire might run. They are quite different.
Yes, well, that's probably true, but I don't think I should be deprived of the evidence. I'll grant leave for you to ask those questions and give Mr. Reid a further right of cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honour. So, Mr. Walkley, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I understand the question. Can I start by saying if there was a fire occurred on totally flat ground and there was no wind and the fuel was the same everywhere, then the fire would travel in a 360-degree direction in every direction. That's never going to happen in the outside. So in this instance, with the fire, with the wind blowing from the east towards the west, you would have a head fire, or the head of the fire would be on the eastern side of that area of origin, or the point of origin.
Sorry, Mr. Walkley, can
You
just
got your
correct
direction
you?
wrong.
I think you got your compass points wrong there.
I have
Wind-
two, sorry.
wind-
It would be going from west to east,
Yes.
and the head fire would be on the western side. The flanking fire, as the fire spreads out from the centre, would be on either side, which would be the north and south, and the backing fire, or the back of the fire, would be on the eastern side, on the western side.
I'm sorry, again, Mr. Walkley, you said in the example of a westerly wind, you just said that the head of the fire would be running towards the west.
No, I'm sorry, I'm getting my western and east
Running towards
mixed up.
the east.
So with a westerly wind, the fire would be running towards the east, and that would be the head of the fire.
Now, when you examined the area of confusion here, can I ask you first to turn your mind to fire indicators that suggested backing fire? Did you observe any physical fire language that suggested backing fire in any direction?
Yes, it was the burning to the, once again, to the rocks, indicating that it burnt from the point or area of origin in a westerly direction, and the cupping to the leaves, once again.
And now what about flanking fire?
That is, once again, the same thing, the fire indicators, which was the cupping to the leaves and the unburnt matter on the lee side of the fire, or the side away from where the fire started, was more prevalent on that side than the fire side where the fire originated from.
Thank you.
More prevalent on what side?
It was more prevalent on the side away from where the fire started, and it had been burnt away on the side closer to where the fire started.
All right, thank you. And I think we've already dealt with the question of running fire. Could the operator please bring up in document 101 photograph number I think it was number 6 we saw yesterday, Mr. Temponi. That's it. So you remember being shown this photograph yesterday, Mr. Walkley, and my learned friend took you to the image in particular of the grass tussock at the foreground of the photograph. And you agreed with Mr. Reid that the fire pattern on that tussock suggested a fire starting from, a fire that was moving from the south toward the north. Have I got your evidence correct?
No, it's towards the point of origin.
I'm sorry.
The fire was
fire
from
was
the south towards the north.
I think Mr. Reid is correcting me that it suggests that, perhaps I'll let you answer, Mr. Walkley. When you look at that grass tussock, what does it tell you or indicate to you about the direction in which the fire that burned that tussock was travelling?
That would indicate that the fire is burning from the left-hand side of what remains of the tussock towards that cone, which is number 20.
Right, so I think we can agree that that does suggest a fire moving from south toward the north, if this photograph is looking towards the west.
Probably more southwest to northeast, isn't it?
Yes, the other
Certainly.
tussock, which is north south.
All right, I'm happy to accept southeast towards the northwest.
That's what I would say, yes.
All right.
Well, is that what you're telling me a moment ago about the flanking fire?
Yes.
Yes, I see. Thank you.
And we saw a separate photograph, which I think was number 10. And another tussock there. And again, if this is now looking towards the east, Mr. Walkley, what does the burn pattern on that tussock indicate to you about the direction in which the fire was travelling as it burned that tussock?
That would have been very similar to the other one in a south to north direction.
Thank you. And again, based on your assessment of all of the physical indicators that you examined within the area of confusion, did you form any view about whether the fire that hit that tussock was a running fire, a backing fire, or a flanking fire?
That would have been a flanking fire. Had it been a running fire, I would expect that the entire tussock would have been burnt.
And can you explain to us, Honour, why you would expect that simply because it was a running fire?
A running fire is a fire burning with much more intensity than a flanking fire, and that is why most firefighting operations would attack a fire from the flanks, because the fire is of less intensity and doesn't tend to do as much damage in this scenario.
Thank you. Now, next question, Mr. Walkley. What is your understanding of the utility of taking a sample of charcoal from a piece of timber in terms of the ability to then use that charcoal to determine something like the species of wood that had been burned?
I've never heard of that happening or occurring, and I've never done it. And
Thank you. Now, could I ask the operator next, please, to bring up within document 101, photograph 008. Sorry, 0008. And again, you were shown this photograph yesterday, Mr. Walkley, and could we zoom into the bottom left-hand quadrant of the photograph? And, oops, bottom left-hand quadrant, other side, please, Mr. Temponi. That's it. And zoom into that rock on the, that's it. Zoom in further there, please. And beneath, effectively beneath the rock, as we look at the photograph, Mr. Walkley, and my learned friend drew your attention to what appears to be a a factory-made cigarette butt. That is, it's not a roll your own. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And my understanding was that you gave evidence yesterday that you'd not seen that cigarette butt when you were there at the property.
No.
And looking at this photograph, can you tell at all how old that cigarette butt might be?
It appears to, from my experience, to be fairly fresh.
Thank you.
All of the photographs are in evidence, aren't they?
They are, Your Honour. The whole of document 101, which is the
Well, I
main...
should disclose to council that I'm confident that I saw one of the police officers who was standing next to Mr. Bowen smoking a cigarette.
I noticed that as well, Your Honour.
So did Mr. Reid, by the
Yes.
sound of it. Well,
Yes. Now, likewise, Mr. Walkley, also in this photograph, I think across towards the right-hand side of the image. Will you go further across still, please? There was something picked up in here that you identified as looking perhaps like the remnants of a roll-your-own cigarette.
No, I didn't identify. I said yesterday I could not identify what that was.
All right, thank you. All right. Now, you were also shown a photograph from Mr. Gilmore's first report at page 291. Mr. Gilmore's report is document 15, and court book page 291, which is internal page 59 in the report. It was pointed out to you, Mr. Walkley, that there was a piece of round black plastic in the top left-hand corner. Do you see that again there, Mr. Walkley?
I do.
And you identified that yesterday as looking like the top of a takeaway coffee cup.
That's what true.
Do you... is there anything about a coffee cup that would suggest to you that it might be implicated in the ignition of a bushfire?
Not unless somebody was there lighting the fire and was having a coffee and dropped his cup of coffee on the ground.
Thank you. And likewise, at the bottom of this photograph, there's a piece of white material, which was said to be a piece of plastic. Again, is there anything about that piece of plastic that suggests to you that it might have anything to do with the ignition of a fire?
If it is plastic, I couldn't identify from that photograph that it is plastic. If it was, then no, there's nothing that would identify to me that it would be associated with the cause of the fire.
Right, thank you. Now, I think lastly, Mr. Walkley, could I trouble the operator please to bring up Mr. Thomas's first report, which is document 19. And I wonder whether Mr. Temponi is able to bring up photograph 13 on court book page 0402. So it's within Mr. Thomas's report at document 19, page 0402. Now, Mr. Temponi, could you also then bring up and display next to this image the fire scene investigation from Mr. Bones, which is part of document 50 and appears at WTS.001.001.0156. And could we bring up court book page 0203, which is photograph 30 from the TFS report, and then display them side by side. Now, Mr. Walkley, firstly, can I ask you, looking at the two images, photograph 13 from Mr. Thomas and photograph 30 from the TFS report, are you able to tell by comparing those two photographs whether the excavation that's shown on the left is approaching the stump from the same angle as the excavation that appears on the right?
I object, Your Honour. This is asking a witness to comment on a document. It's something that the court can do.
Well, that was just crossing my mind, but I'm not sure whether the question when completed and the answer when given involves any element of expertise. I mean, I can see for myself.
Yeah.
Please, I won't press the question, Your Honour.
Yes.
Mr. Walkley, could I draw your attention to the two, in the photograph on the left-hand side, there are two, I think we can agree, pieces of wood that appear to be sloping up towards the left of the photograph and have burn marks at their left extremities. Can you see them?
I can.
Do you recall whether you saw anything, any structures like that in the ground in the area of the tree stump that you were excavating or involved in excavating?
No, I can't.
Thank you.
Just leave those there for a moment. Just looking at those two tusk-like pieces of wood with burn marks at the top, but not burned underneath. Can I take it that counsel to not dispute that the burned surface would be the surface either closest to or above the ground?
That would be my expectation, Your Honour, yes.
Mr. Reid?
Yes, Your Honour.
Yes, thank you.
Please. Your Honour, no further questions from Mr. Walkley. May be excused.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Reid, anything arising out of Mr. Armstrong's hypothetical?
No, there's not. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks very much, Mr. Walkley, for your attendance. You're relieved on the trial, which means you're free to go, but you're also welcome to stay and watch proceedings at any time if you wish, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Your Honour, the next witness who I'll call in a moment is Mr. Bones, about whom Your Honour has heard. Now, by way of preamble, Mr. Bones is still a serving member of the Tasmanian Fire Service, and the Fire Service made its, what I might call, career officers available to both the parties. But as Your Honour may be aware, neither of the parties was able to obtain an actual signed witness statement from the career members, and we were not able to engage Mr. Bones to prepare a formal report in the usual expert report sense. We did provide our learned friends with a statement of anticipated evidence from Mr. Bones, and Mr. Bones in that statement indicated that he agreed to be bound by the expert witness code of conduct, albeit that his report is not in the usual formal style of a report for the purposes of court proceedings. My learned friend has indicated that he's happy for me to tender Mr. Bones's report as at least the principal part of his evidence in chief. But I do also propose to ask Mr. Bones some questions about the the issue of the September burning off fire and whether that might plausibly have been an explanation for the burning to the root that was identified. And I'd seek Your Honour's leave to be able to ask those additional questions of him.
All right. Firstly, are you content with that narrative?
I didn't
Are you
quite hear
content with that narrative?
I am content with that narrative.
And what about the request?
Well, we'll wait for that, Your Honour, and see if it's objectionable when
All
it
right.
comes.
Well, now this leaves me in a position where I'm going to have to retire for some time to read the report because I haven't done so deliberately,
Yes.
not knowing which form the expert evidence was going to take.
Well, the report by Mr Bones is in fact already in evidence, Your Honour. It's the TFS fire scene investigation report. And if it's convenient to Your Honour, then perhaps we might take a short adjournment, give Your Honour a chance to read it, and then we'll call Mr Bones.
Yep.
If it please.
We'll take an early break and I'll read Mr Bones' report.
Thank you, Your Honour.
All stand, please.